Well, good evening. I have echoed this to Pastor and several people this week about just how much I've enjoyed being here. Just love your church. It just seems like you're kind of doing all the things you should be doing. Okay, which is a really good thing. I want to look at the Word with you one more time this evening. If you have your Bibles, you can open them up to James chapter 1. Began looking at James on Sunday, and we never really did get to the first opening of the verse 1, that is. We began looking at verses 2 through 4. And in verse 1, James introduces himself, and he uses some really interesting language. He's not like Jude, who just comes right out as a brother, a brother of James, and expresses who he is. He's not, like Paul and some of his lengthy kind of titles that he uses, which is perfectly fine. James just says he's a servant of God. And I really found that was interesting language because it's the first and only time the word servant is used in this book. Okay? Every other time, anytime anyone in the body, this is really important, anytime anyone in the body is referred to, they are never a servant. There's always family, kind of a family title, a family connotation given to that individual. 20 times, okay? 20 times when it's either talking about God, he's going to be father. When talking about some man in the church, he's going to be a brother. It even mentions sister, okay? So every single time after verse 1, he speaks of this family relationships, which speaks volumes to me. Because we walk through this whole thing in Revelation and in John, when you and I, it just explains, you and I are not servants. If you are a Christian, you're a child of God. And the language in the New Testament, if you get a hold of this, the language in the New Testament is downright graphic, especially in their culture. I mean, Paul says you can walk into the throne room boldly. That's like not knocking stuff. Okay? I mean, that's the way that a child does. And you can speak to him as Abba. And some people say, yes, that means father. No, it does not. It means dad. It's not formal. Okay? This isn't like Pride and Prejudice. Father, are you busy? Okay? And I'm all about the movie. I love it. Watch it twice. But, okay, this is banging on the door, kids running in. Hey, what are you doing in here? Dad, what's going on? That's my house. Okay? There's no time when it's inappropriate, for my kids to come in and pop on Dad's lap. Hey, Dad, what's up? You want to go outside? And see, that's the language that's used, and it's father-child kind of relationship. So I found it really interesting, to say the least, that when James introduces himself, he uses this title, servant. Why would he do that? And the whole bulk of our first major study in James is when you really get into the book itself and begin to look at how he speaks and pieces things together, the number one characteristic of a child of God is that they're a servant. Okay, that's how you identify them. Okay, meaning that a child of God is someone who's always focused on someone else. It's not about what's best for me; it's what's best for you. It's not about what's going to benefit. See, there's no angles in that. See, the body of Christ should resonate with how can we meet your need, which is pretty significant because we've been to certain churches, which is not yours. Okay, if it wasn't yours, I wouldn't be talking about this at all. Okay, if this was not you. Okay, but I've been to certain churches where you're not like that's what I'm saying. But I've been to certain churches where it came out backwards, didn't it? Don't take it like that. I've been to certain churches where you're under the impression you can go there. If you like the music they like, you like the structure, the way they like it, you like doing the things they do, saying the things they say, hey, you can go there, but don't try to ruffle anything. Okay, it's almost like a club kind of thing. We've been around teen groups where I'm almost wondering if my kid's cool enough to be in that group. Okay, that's not the body that he's describing here. Okay, how can we help you? See, how can we be involved in your life? How can Jesus use us? That's the attitude of the body. Now, he moves right in, which is so beautiful how he writes. When you come into verses 2, 3, and 4, that's a characteristic of being a perfect work. We looked at that Sunday morning. Verse 4, God's desire is not that you just do perfect things, but that you be the perfect kind of person, which means, yeah, you're going to put your foot in your mouth once in a while, okay? But your heart's right, okay? It's how can I help? And I'm feeling the way that he feels, and I'm seeing the way that he sees, and I'm driven by what he's driven by. See, that's the perfect work kind of thing, which is going to carry you through the difficult times in your life. And that's how you're going to persevere. Because if you're not the real deal, you're not going to persevere. Okay? So you're not going to make it. If you're not the real deal, you're not going to make it. Then Sunday night we looked at verses 5 through 8, where she talks about being the perfect work and overcoming and persevering in this life. Without a doubt, you have to have wisdom. Not wisdom in terms of, academic kind of Bible knowledge. You need to study and learn facts and information. No, that's not what we're talking about. You have to live in his perspective. Live with Jesus. This right here. What it means to be a new creation is not necessarily that you're different. I mean, you're different, but not different oftentimes like you think you're different. Okay? I'm a Christian, so wow, I'm no longer going to like donuts. No, okay? In fact, I watched you eat tonight, okay? Some of you proved that. Okay? So it's not about I don't like donuts, okay? It's about I'm going to live my life with him. I'm not doing this alone anymore, man. I don't have to be alone anymore. See, I'm not facing this by myself kind of stuff. And he bullies me in the midst of my day. And you can use whatever language you want. That's fine. I don't care. You don't have to agree with me. But he's a stalker, man. Stalker Jesus. I'll be in the middle of my day and he'll just from the inside just groan or twist or whatever he does and wakes me up out of my world. Offers me an alternate perspective of my circumstance, Do not run that person off the road, Jeremiah. Okay, do not do that. He wakes me up out of my world. Offers me an alternative perspective. That's the wisdom that he's talking about. It's plentiful. It's overflowing. Okay? And he wants you to have that. We talked all about that. We did a little break in the Bible study. And last night, if you were not able to be here, what we looked at was basically evangelism, stewardship. Each and every one of you are an integral part, and this sounds so preachery and churchy and all that kind of stuff, but just honestly, each and every one of you are absolutely significant in the body. Seriously, you serve a purpose in his kingdom. And I would go as far as to say, I think I'd fight over this, seriously, that the kingdom is not going to be what it's supposed to be without you. Period, man. You've got to be in. Now, I used to look at people, and it's interesting. You go through, and you have people that have this servant kind of, a deal, and hey, what's best for you, and we love that, and it flows out in everything that they're doing, and hey, they've got this heart of Jesus, and they're persevering in the trials, and they're making it through, and operating out of his perspective, but it seems like I've heard people are just scared to death, man. How do you do it? And I'm not an outgoing person, and I'm not capable, and I don't have what it takes, and I'm not like you, Jeremiah. Dude, I've got a C- in speech. Seriously. And a C in preaching. I still don't preach right, okay? Seriously, Stephen Manley, all of you guys know Stephen Manley, he says, Jeremiah, your sermons are pointless. Because they don't have any points in them. Yeah, he ain't funny. That's his humor. But so I'm figuring this thing out as well, and it's interesting that if you're alive and you belong to Jesus and you love him with all your heart, you're qualified. You're qualified for how he wants to use you. And honestly, I'll be quite frank, man. He's going to speak to you about it. It'll change your life. What we talked about last night, it'll change your life to just open your eyes and see where you're at in your current circumstance. We spend, and you probably don't do this, obviously, because you're much more spiritual than me. But I find myself in certain circumstances that are so uncomfortable and so surprising that it's almost the whole time I'm going through them, I'm praying that he gets me out of them. When probably it didn't surprise him. Hold on. Yeah, it probably didn't surprise him. It's like he knew. You know what I'm saying? It didn't take him by surprise. He wasn't caught off guard. He's not up there going, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And perhaps, yeah, hey, I don't like this, Jesus. And man, I mean, come on. I feel like this is where you're going. And man, we need your hand. But I'm wide open for what you want to do in this time of my life. Why do you have me here? Why do you want to use me? Why this big change? Why this big turn? I totally wasn't expecting that. Okay. He gets to some of this in verses 9 through 11, which is what I want to look at with you this evening. And I'm going to read it, and we're going to kind of walk through it. James writes, right after the whole wisdom section, he says, the brother in humble circumstances ought to take pride in his high position. But the one who is rich should take pride in his low position, because he will pass away like a wildflower. For the sun rises with its scorching heat and withers the plants, its blossoms falls, and its beauty is destroyed. In the same way, the rich man will fade away even while he goes about his business. Now, it was interesting to me, as we begin to walk through this, and I begin to kind of process this, dig in and say, okay, first impressions, what's he talking about? Interesting to me how kind of it seems a lot of people knee-jerk reaction when they read this think that James is writing about rich and poor, okay? And it's a huge contrast. And it is a contrast. In fact, at the beginning of verse 10, there's a clear contrast that's set up. The word but is used. Okay? It's the word day in the original language. And it's used, translated in a few different ways. But most of the time, depending on the context, as it is here, it sets up a contrast. And the contrast is very prevalent. It's very obvious. He's talking about the brother in humble circumstances, NIV translation, that's being contrast with the rich. The brother in humble circumstances with his high position, and the brother who is rich in his low position. That's the contrast that's taking place. But there's more to it than just, it's not money. In fact, it doesn't even work when you get into some of the grammar. For example, the word rich can be used, and we'll look at this in a few minutes, more detail about it. But the rich doesn't just have to do with money. This word here in the original language, the Greek word, doesn't just have to do with money. When it's used in the New Testament. It's used in a variety of things. You can be rich in terms of finances, but you can be rich in terms of money. Okay? But what's important about both humble for the first guy and rich for the second guy, those are not describing attributes. Listen to this. They're not describing attributes that a person has. Not talents, not possessions. It's actually describing the person himself. In fact, listen to this. In verse 9, when it says the humble or the brother in humble circumstances, you go in the original language, and this is a terrible translation. This is a terrible translation. In the original language, the word circumstances is not even there. You see, why'd they put it there? They made it up. Why'd they do that? I don't know. They should have called me. I'd have told them. Don't do that. The word circumstance is not even there in the original language, because humble is not describing circumstances. Humble describes the brother. So he's talking about a humble person over against a rich person. The emphasis, what's being contrasted, is a humble person and a rich person. And by the way, humble doesn't have anything to do with money. So you cannot talk about, and for that matter, in the New Testament, it's not bad to have money. Okay? And I understand if you feel guilty about that, you can give it to me. I'm cool with that. Okay? I have like no problem with it at all. Just kidding. But it's not wrong to have money. Okay? It's your attitude. It's realizing the stewardship that you have. Okay? And perhaps God has, I have met people, my brother-in-law, I was talking to Pastor White about this before the services. We were talking to him. He just has the ability to make money. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's called to the ministry, and he left a world of making money, I'm like, can't you do both? Yeah. But he has ability to see something and say how to make a dollar out of it. It's a gift thing. And he supports his own ministry that way for the most part. He supported other ministries. It's a gift to him. In fact, oftentimes my wife looks at me and says, why don't you have that gift? I'm like, I don't know. Okay. I have a gift to steal money, but I don't have the gift to make money. No, that's not a gift, and I don't do that. But I don't have that kind of an ability, okay? But it's rich having the ability in terms of stewardship with money is very similar to a person, and we all know this, in terms of mechanics, okay? My other brother-in-law, my sister, That was my wife's sister, is Chad. My sister is married to an airplane mechanic. And he just gets geeked out over working on engines. He's like, Friday night, up all night working on an engine. Yes! I'm like, weird, okay? I get geeked out about watching Storage Wars. That's what I get geeked out about, okay? Or cool Greek word studies. But that's his thing, man. He's wired that way, okay? Are you following me? So rich is not bad. It's one of the many areas of life in which a person is gifted, if it's going to do with money, okay? But this passage, the emphasis is not on money, okay? And so we're going to walk and we're going to look at this together, and you're going to see this, that it's, again, not possession stuff, it's individual. It's a person that's rich versus a humble individual. Let's look at the first one together. The term humble, because when I first read that and began to get into the study, I thought, okay, he's talking about a humble person. That means a very, wise and calm and gracious. He's not conceited. He's not self-centered. He's just, a very humble kind of individual. No, that's not at all what humble means. In fact, let me give you two places, and you're going to see this for yourself. I thought it was hysterical. First place, Romans chapter 12. This word is used, but it's not translated humble. It's translated in the NIV as low position. Literal translation means menial tasks. He's talking, this whole context of what Paul is writing to this church about is in the relationship to society and in the body and with the world. How you talk to people. You follow me? Okay? How you're going to conduct yourself in public. Beginning in verse 14, he gets in this role and he says, listen, hey, bless those who persecute you, man. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Mourn with those who mourn. Live in harmony with one another. Listen to this. He says, don't be proud. Be willing, listen to this, be willing to associate with people capable of menial tasks. Capable of people of low position. Don't be conceited, okay? Back in our passage, when it talks about a low position, the humble brother is in his high position and the other guy in his low position. That's not this word. This word literally means that it's a different word for low position. This one literally means menial task. So the word for humble, listen to this, the word for humble literally describes a person, okay? It has nothing to do with money. It describes a person that's just not that sharp. See, they're only capable of menial tasks, kind of stuff. See, it's the kind of guy that volunteers at the church, And you look at him and you think, well, I don't think he's going to wire the soundboard. Okay? Yeah. Here's a broom. Don't hurt yourself. Go at it. Okay? That's not bad. Okay? That's not bad. I was in the Marine Corps. Okay? That's that other branch. And is this an Army area? Army? Right on. A lot of friends. I was in the Marine Corps and took my ASVAB, and I didn't do too hot, but they made me a mechanic, it was like step above cook for the Marine Corps. So not saying against you mechanics, okay, if you're mechanics. Walked into that one. Didn't mean to say that. But where I was from, I was a mechanic. And I wasn't like a big-time mechanic. I was changing the oil mechanic, okay? Different echelons of mechanic, different shops, third shop, second shop, first shop. And I was first shop, okay, changing the oil. And after about 6-7 months of that, they realized that I couldn't even do that. That's the truth. Me and wrenches, I can do it. I mean, I learned some things, but dude, I hate it. I just absolutely, that's like my version of hell. If I go there, I'll be a mechanic forever. And so they took me out of that. And I was just not capable. And this is and it's a funny story, and it's perfect since you're in military. But we'd get together in the morning, and I just dreaded it. And I came in, and I was reserved for the guy that was handed out all the tools for today in the locker. You know what I'm talking about, whatever that guy's called? Is a QC area for us, what it was called. But I was the guy that handed the tools for the people that actually did the work. That was me, because that was all I was capable of. Okay, screwdriver, I know what that is, and I'd run and get it. Okay, I was only capable of menial tasks. That's this person. Get this. He says, okay, looking at James, let me put it in the right wordage. He says, verse 9, the brother who's only capable of menial tasks should take pride in his high position. Let me give you another place this is used. I think this is really cool. That was Romans chapter 12. Paul, we get this picture. This is so neat to me. We get this picture of Paul, 6'6", 225 pounds, Christian kind of superstar, Superman kind of, looks like pastor. Okay, just, don't make him mad. Hey, Paul, big time, that kind of, seriously, he's this giant in terms of Christianity. You know what I'm saying? Listen to how Paul describes himself. In 2 Corinthians chapter 10, listen to this. Paul says, by the meekness and gentleness of Christ, I appeal to you. I, Paul, who am timid. That's our word. That's not too sharp. Short bus kid. That's this guy right here. Okay? I, Paul, who am timid when face to face, but bold when I'm away. Do you know what he's describing? There are those of you who go to the store, embarrassed, people yell at you, something happens, and you're like, and that's it. And then you get in your car, and all the way home you rehearse, I know what I would have said. I know what I should have said. And then in thinking I know what I should, you relive that, and you replay the scene over and over until you get home. You never do that? Whatever. You all do that at some point in time. You know what I'm saying? You go and replay the scene, that's what I should have said. In fact, let me think, yeah, that'd have been awesome. Yeah. That's what he's talking about. He's that guy who doesn't know what to say. He's not quick. He's not witty, okay? He's timid. He's the short guy. He's timid when he's face to face, but that's the kind of guy, self-admitted. Paul, hero. So when James is writing this verse, he says, listen, the timid brother, the just menial the janitor guy. See, he's never going to even make it to mailroom. I'm telling you. Okay? Christianity is littered with those kinds of people. Seriously, Christianity is littered with those kinds of people. That's the person he's talking about. Consider it's a high position. You'd say, why would he say that? Look at the next guy that he describes. He comes into the rich. He says, beginning at verse 10, but the one who is rich. Now again, the word rich is used in Ephesians chapter 2, and it's associated with mercy. But it describes, literally, this person it doesn't have to do with money. It describes a person who has everything. They've got talent. They've got good looks. They're quick. They're witty. They know what to say. They're likable. Okay? They fit good up on stage. And this is 100% truth. I can't just be more honest with you. I'm not a people person at all. I don't like any of you. No, I'm just kidding. No, that's not true. But I'm not like, I go to teen camp, and they're like, Jeremiah, we got this skit. Will you be in our skit? I'm like, dude, no, I'm terrible. You take away the Bible, I just stand up there and turn red, and it's not even the funny red. It's the awkward red that everyone goes, get him off the stage. It's making us feel uncomfortable. That's the kind of individual that I am. I was never good up front and actor stuff and public speaking and C- in speech. I'd stand up and everything would go out of my mind. It was just, you try to convince God of that. When he's calling you to preach, you're like, dude, was you there? I mean, did you see me? I mean, come on, And again, we talked about this just in passing last night, but that's what most everybody said. Moses said that. Like the man Moses, like Red Sea Moses, going up against Pharaoh Moses. He said, I can't even speak. God's like, dude, well, and he didn't say, no, you can. He was like, yeah, you can't. Okay, Aaron, go with him. He couldn't speak. He had Aaron go with him. And then you have this track record of people in the Old Testament, David, who's the youngest of his brothers that's used. I find it remarkable, the kinds of people in these kinds of settings that Jesus calls to ministry. It's normally the person comes up that's sweating bullets, that doesn't want to, that's scared to death. They're going to keep quiet. And they just, I don't have what it takes. There's no way. God's got to be mistaken. This is not me. And they come and talk to me and I say, without a doubt it's you. Without a doubt it's you. In fact, we have internship program. I don't know if you, especially Patrick, if any of your teens, you probably already know about some of this, but we have internship programs. And if you have any kind of a call upon your life, you can come and you travel with me throughout a summer, my wife and I, and we do like 9 camps together, and you're a slave that's abused. Okay? Seriously, 19 camps in a row. It's ridiculous. And I always love to take the people that just have no talent and ability at all. Because if God uses them, the only way they're going to get used is if God uses them. You know what I'm saying? Because there's no way they could do it. There's no way they could pull that off. They don't have that ability. See, they're not the rich. And see, they're not beautiful. And what's interesting in the rich passage, now check this out. This is what's so, and again, you have to kind of separate this in terms of the world, but it even falls apart in the world after a while. But in terms of the church, you're on equal playing ground. Okay? See, your good looks aren't going to help you any. I mean, Paul says, I want my preaching not to be the product of this or that and the other, but a demonstration of the Spirit's power. Don't you dare look and say Jeremiah's talented, because I'm not talented. Seriously, I'm not talented. I'm menial task guy. I've always been menial task guy. I mean, hey, it's him. He's responsible for this mess. Not me. He's the big deal. He's the one that's... See, I don't have the list. And you go through and you look at what he says about the rich, especially when you move on to the next verse. He says, verse 10, but the one who is rich should take pride in his low position. Why? Because he will pass away like a wildflower. And again, they didn't have big screen TVs. We're talking about wildflower, which is used throughout the New Testament as a thing of beauty. Okay? It was decorations. It was given as gifts, that kind of stuff. It was a thing of beauty. But it will pass away. It really, literally, I don't find it funny, but I can see how people joke about it. But the 45-year-old woman or the 50-year-old woman who's trying to look 20, it's so sad. Seriously, it's so sad to me. Because it's revealed literally where she gets her self-worth. Really, where she gets her identity. Okay? That's the whole focus of the thing. And I've seen it all the time. You have these young girls, and I've learned to deal with it. I don't tolerate it. You come into the camp, and she's not bad. She's not evil. She's probably hadn't had dad in her life. She hasn't had godly parents in her life or mentoring her and speaking to her. And she's coming in her junior high years. She's turning into this gorgeous young woman, and she's learning very quickly that that's helping her get what she wants in life. And so she comes to teen camp, and she wants to be friends with the speaker, and God's moving. She comes up and says, hi, Jeremiah, and then wants to hug all the time and all that kind of stuff. And I just mess up their hair and throw them on the ground in the name of Jesus. That's exactly what I do, man. I'm telling you. I just go, hey, what's going on, girl? And they're just like... And then I'll come back up and put my arm around, and it establishes relationship. This is who I am, and this is who you are. Okay? You're a teen, and I am a speaker. I'm a grown man. Okay? This is what's appropriate, and this one. And you establish boundaries there. Okay? But if Jesus does not correct that in her, she's going to be a 50-year-old woman still trying to get through life with that 16-year-old mindset. Are you with me? I mean, dude, we see it everywhere in our culture. Okay? And it's not just with money, which is being a poor talent, but it's the whole thing with talent. You're going to get old, man. I'm 40. Pastor's even older. We were talking about that, I mean, look at the size of his son. I mean, my word, CJ's not allowed to be that big. It's hard to keep up with him, It's hard to do that. You get old, okay? And see, I don't want my identity to be wrapped up into those kind of things. I don't want my identity to be wrapped up in the things that I can accomplish. Okay? For instance, and this is huge for preachers like us, what if my identity was wrapped up in how well I preached? Well, then what happens one day when I can't preach anymore? See, what if my identity was wrapped up in how many of you responded? Do you see what I'm talking about? Okay, this is the issue. This is the issue that will always come to an end. Okay, And then he talks about the sun, which burns, it fades away, it tears up, it breaks down, that what's a product of this world will always be a product of this world. I want you to turn back with me. Let me give you a quick example of this. This is so good. We have to be quick. But I want you to go back to the book of John, chapter 2. And if you have not read John, especially if you're a new believer or you haven't read a ton in the New Testament, whatever, I would encourage you to read through John chapters 1, 2, 3. Just especially. You go on, read some other things, but read it and reread it for like a month. Just read it every day, twice a day. Once in the morning, think on it, once in the afternoon. Before I preached on James, I read the book once a day for about 6 months. Just read it, man. Fill your mind with it, okay? And it's interesting in John, the whole dilemma, this is so awesome. Jesus, and we don't have time for all this, but Jesus comes to this earth, and he's a rabbi. And rabbis in their culture, Ray Vandelon that's a guy on the internet you can research. He is big time into this. See, at the age of 12, a decision had to be made in their culture of whether you're going to go after school and go to a famous rabbi school and become some rabbi student in which they would train. You've probably heard this before. And they would narrow that number down until a rabbi would have 12 to 15 kids that would follow him, young adults, grow up, and then go and he would pour himself into them. If you didn't make the cut, you could either go to a lesser school, but that was kind of bad because then the rabbi was offended. You chose someone else over him. And so oftentimes you never get picked. You go back and just do the family business, okay? And so when Jesus picks his students, he doesn't pick young boys. He picks rejects. They were rejected. And they're not only rejected, they're like really bad rejects. Hothead rejects, James and John. Peter kind of rejects. Matthew, tax collector, rejects. And he goes in, and that's the whole tone. It was a scandal. It was ridiculous. It was embarrassing. If you could get that kind of picture, okay? It's different than what we think of when we see like Jesus of Nazareth, which is a great movie. But Jesus goes to this wedding, and if you come in chapter 2, the first 11 verses has to do with Jesus and his 12 disciples crashing this wedding party. And then after that happens, he goes down to Jerusalem. From verse 12 to the end of the chapter is a major section entering into the conversation with Nicodemus. Verses 12 through 16, okay, verses 12 through 16 give us all the details of what Jesus did when he cleansed the temple. Jesus comes in, he grabs tables, flips them over, gets a hold of a whip, goes at it. I mean, he is just, my word, all over it. Verses 12 through 16 gives us all those details. Verses 17 through the end of the chapter are 3 different groups that John highlights that saw what he did and responded to it. Verse 17 is what the disciples saw and how they responded. Verses 18 through 22 is Nicodemus and his group who saw what he did and responded. They're called the Jews in this gospel. And verses 23 down to the end of the chapter are those who saw what he did and end up becoming believers. Okay? That's the 3 groups. They saw what he did. What's so amazing about all of this is that you have the leaders of Israel. They're the ones that you would think about. They're the scribes, they're the teachers of the law, they're the most spiritual, the rules, they're the seminary professors, they're the pastors. See, that's verses 22 through 20, or verses 18 through 22. That's that group. That's the group you would think. I mean, use our heads here. If Jesus came in this day and age, you would think, if he came to Clarksville, you'd think we would know it, right? We would see him and recognize. We would be a part of that somehow. I mean, if God moved in our town and some phenomenal thing was happening, you think you'd be in the center of it, wouldn't you? I mean, run with that, man. Run with that, okay? God himself comes, and in verses 18 through 22, they are absolutely clueless on every level of what he's doing. I mean, they come and say, "Why are you doing this?" He says it, they're confused. "Do you want to tear down the temple? Tear it down, I'll raise it back up." They're confused. It's like he's on a total different page. But you look at, this is really important, check this out. You look at verse 17, you've got 12 ignorant fishermen. Okay? Tax collector types. Just rejects. Go home, try to make it in the real world, pay your taxes, try to get through life, don't hurt anybody, okay? Timid, menial task people, literally, these 12 disciples. And yet Jesus comes in, and it's really cool because when you go back, and this is some exegetical fun stuff, at least for me, when Jesus is on his way down to the temple, see, there's nothing in any of the Gospels where Jesus prepares the disciples for the cleansing of the temple. In all four Gospels, Jesus is not going to the temple going, wonder what's going to happen today. Wonder what the Messiah is going to do in the temple today. See, he doesn't do that. He's just walking along. They're clueless, normal day, walks in church, and he goes crazy. And what John tries to sell me, get this, what John tries to sell me in verse 17 is that all 12 disciples at the same time remember this one obscure prophecy where this is the only place in the entire New Testament where it's even talked about, not even in any other gospel, that all 12 disciples remembered that it was zeal for your house will consume me. Yeah. If I ask each and every one of you, okay, what passage I preached on after the service, half of you are probably going to come up with something and you guys are going to disagree. And I mean, come on, we all are independent in thinking, and he's trying to tell me every one of them saw this, reached back in their mind. There's no way. There's no way that's possible. Okay? And yet at the same time, all these disciples see clearly. They see clearly what's going on. They're all on the same page. You'd say, how is that possible? The question you're asking is the same question Nicodemus asked. Okay? Chapter 3. You go into chapter 3, and what happens, and he tells us very plainly in the first few verses of chapter 3 that Nicodemus, he was there. He was there in the temple. He saw this. He saw the miracles. He saw the teachings, all of that kind of stuff. And he comes out to Jesus in the nighttime after all of his responsibilities. He seeks Jesus out, and he's got some questions for him. And listen to how he talks to Jesus. Verse 2 of chapter 3. He came to Jesus at night and said, Rabbi, we know you are a teacher who has come from God. For no one could perform the miraculous signs you're doing if God were not with him. He says, listen, Jesus, it's obvious God's with you. I mean, come on. You're like rocking it today. Okay? I mean, seriously, God's using you. God has to be with you. Jesus looks at him and very plainly he says, Nicodemus, you cannot even see the kingdom of God unless you're born again. In other words, you cannot be improved on, Nicodemus. Okay? You have to start all over again. Again, Nicodemus is confused. He's like, okay, go back in the womb? Yeah, it's going to be tough. I think I'll pull that one off. I mean, so literally, he's being serious. He's not joking. He's being serious. I have no idea what you're talking about, Jesus. And then Jesus looks at him and says, listen, let me break it down for you a little bit. Flesh, listen, look at verse 6. Flesh produces flesh, spirit produces spirit. Okay? Flesh produces flesh. What is that? Your riches, in other words, not money, your talent, listen to me, your talent, your ability, your political pull, your job. See, none of that is going to produce what God desperately wants produced in your life. Flesh produces flesh. When we see this in the world, I mean, we just counsel and we're walking God through this freedom from debt thing. We're working with him in his own life, and phenomenal guy. But see, he's dead set that $1 million is going to make him happy. I mean, it's not. I'm just telling you, it's not. Okay? There's a person in my family, won't tell you who she is. Grew up poor her whole life. For 6 years in a row, she made over $120,000 a year. At the end of the 6 years, she was more in debt than she was when she started. It's the same. Could it be that it's not the circumstances that are a problem, but it's that we're the problem? Seriously, we're the problem. We're the issue. And so he says, listen, flesh cannot produce. You don't have the right resource. And he breaks all this down to Nicodemus. And Nicodemus' response, and we're almost to the end of this, Nicodemus in verse 9 says, how can this be? In other words, you mean all my education? All my coming to church on Sunday? I'm not a bad person. I'm not evil. Come on, what are you talking about? And Jesus gives, listen to this, Jesus gives this ridiculous illustration. Verse 10. He says, you are Israel's teacher, and you don't understand these things? Come on, listen, this is third grade stuff, Nicodemus. He says, I tell you the truth. And listen to the language he uses. Jesus says, we speak of what we know, And we testify to what we have seen. But you people don't accept our testimony. Who's the we? Now, some people are going to say, oh, it's Jesus and God. No. That's right. Jesus never uses we language for him and the Father in any of the Gospels. Okay? It's always the Father and I. There's this separate. He's identified with us. Okay? He doesn't put himself on the same level in terms of his Christology, and that's a long conversation. So when he says, we speak of what we knew, look at this. He's looking at Nicodemus. Put this in your mind. He's looking at Nicodemus, points to these 12 ignorant, they're over there scratching themselves, picking their nose, not paying attention. Wake up. Okay? That group over there, they're fighting among themselves. It's my turn, spoiled, rotten kid stuff. And Jesus says, we speak of what we know. You're not in, Nicodemus. He's a good man, becomes a follower later on, seeks Jesus out at night, got all the education. Just phenomenal guy. But he looks and says, Jesus says, you are so messed up, you have to start all over. Get back in the womb, come back out, try it again. Okay? That's what he tells him. Nicodemus says, how could that be? Jesus says, listen, you're not in, but they're in. We speak of what we know. The Greek word there for know is not the Greek word gnosis or oida, which has to do with systematic. They can't give you a systematic theology of this whole thing. It's the word gnosko, which we talked about during Monday night. It's a knowledge that's gained through personal involvement or experience. In other words, we speak of what we know. They can't explain it, but they're experiencing something. They're knowing things that they cannot know. They're catching on to things that they cannot catch on to. We speak of things we know. Okay? How does he say it? I tell you the truth, we speak of the things what we know, and we testify to what we have seen. And the word seen there is perceived. In other words, they're seeing things that they shouldn't be able to see. They're knowing things that they shouldn't know. Back in our passage in verse 17, you say, okay, hold on. So the disciples all at the same time looked at Jesus and all came to the same conclusion that zeal for your house will consume me. They all reached back in their mind. The word there, remembered, in verse 17, then the disciples remembered. The word remembered is in the passive voice, which doesn't mean the disciples were responsible for remembering. It means they were caused to remember. And who do you think caused them to remember? The Father, the Spirit. See, the disciples are living. Do you understand that the Christian life is all about what he's talking about to Jesus? You don't need any kind of talent, ability, personality. God made you who you are. Stop trying to be who you're not. He is the only resource that you need. He's the only, in fact, anything that you lean on besides Jesus is not going to measure up. He doesn't need your talent. He doesn't need your ability. And you're going to find this over and over and over. Jesus asked them, who does the people say that I am? They're coming up with all these kinds of things. He says, who do you say? Everybody's quiet. And Peter says, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus says, my Father revealed this to you. One of the things that I've been really curious about, in recent days is, what would happen if we stepped out in the midst of our world and said, Jesus, I feel totally inadequate. In fact, I'm downright scared to death about what I'm facing. I'm just being honest with you, there's no way my wife could have been a military wife. There's no way. I go away for 2 weeks and it's just like, it's hard to be away from me, really is what it is. But she just, seriously, Pastor and I have talked about this, and people at church, I just applaud you. That's so difficult. And I listen to my wife, there are days where she just, and I know you feel this, there's days where you feel just, I can't do this anymore. See, wouldn't it be wonderful, and this is a weird thing to think of, but wouldn't it be wonderful if you almost just lived in that, and said, Jesus, I give you I want to lean on your strength today. And you're saying, what is it? Will you become like superpower? Will you go? No. Remember, you're not going to all of a sudden not like donuts anymore. You're not all of a sudden get thinner when Jesus comes in your life. Okay? You're young guys, it's not like, wow, man, hey, my sex drive just will turn off until I get married. Yeah, just keep hoping for that one.